Hi everyone, and welcome to my new commentary video about my latest drive from Chongqing to Songji Ancient Town in Yongchuan district. Now, our starting point is a place that's very popular among domestic and even foreign tourists, and that is called the Ring Mall. Now, there are two in Chongqing nowadays, but this is the original one that opened in 2022. But earlier last year, a second one opened up near Central Park, and that's actually a lot bigger than this mall here, but this one is big enough, and it's only about a kilometre away from where I live. So this is going to be the starting point of our journey today. I'm not starting from home because we're going away for about 2 days. So before we went to Yongchuan district, we stopped by the supermarket, which is on the first basement floor. We bought a couple of things, and that will last us through one night in Yongchuan and a second night in another city called Yongchuan. This is the first time I've done a commentary video like this, so if I make a terrible job of it, don't be too hard on me. But I do know there are some other videos on YouTube that just do pure dashcam footage in Chongqing and other cities, and some of them have insane views, like hundreds of thousands, but whenever I've tried to do it, I guess because I'm a small channel, yeah, it doesn't really gain that much traction, so I suppose I've got to go one step further. So what I'm going to do on this journey is tell you about some of the sights along the way, my experiences of driving, and anything interesting that happens. Anyway, this particular car park is fairly well designed. I mean, a lot of them, I would say in China, are designed like a bit of a maze, and some of them are kind of very dark and dingy with lots of blind corners as well. But this one, the Ring Mall, was developed by Hong Kong Land, and overall they did a fairly good job of it. Now, it's not too difficult to find your way around, but I've lived in this area for 7 or 8 years now, and you know, I come to this place very often, so I know this car park like the back of my hand. And what I like about this car park as well is if you go to some of the newer nice malls, some of them offer you limited free parking, so we can park for like 2 hours now, and everyone now kind of does it through the mobile app. So if you go onto WeChat, you can go onto the mini application for this mall or whatever mall you're at. Then before you set off, you can basically pay for your car parking fees if there are any, and then when it comes to the barrier, it'll just open directly for you. But what gets a bit annoying sometimes is that you do get people who can't be bothered and they wait until they reach the barrier. Of course, the barrier doesn't open, and then before you know it, you have a huge queue of cars behind you, and just some people are just really dippy, so it just takes them ages. They like get out the phone and they have to like scan the QR code because none of these barriers are staffed anymore. Yeah, and they just like fiddle around and they have to register and all that, and before you know it, you know, you're stuck behind them for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then I've had this in the past where maybe the car behind them, during that time they could easily have paid for the car park themselves, but they don't. You know, they insist on waiting until they reach the barrier themselves. So if you're really, really unlucky, now you can get stuck for ages in these malls, but thankfully today we got out, no problem at all. But anyway, the mall normally gives you 2 hours of free parking. And then sometimes, if you want to park a little bit longer, you can actually wait until you've parked up for 1 hour and 59 minutes. click on the button that you're going to leave, then you get like an extra 30 minutes to leave the actual car park. So in practice, if you get your timing right, you can park free there for up to about 2.5 hours. So anyway, we've already left the Ring Mall. My camera, which is a DJI Action 3, is actually stuck on the outside of the windscreen. And I've kind of progressed a little bit. When I first started doing these dashcam videos, I was a little bit unsure how well the suction pad would stick to the windscreen. So the first few times I put it inside the car. But that always doesn't work very well because, you know, you get some dirt on the window getting in the way. And as you're driving along, you know, if it rains a bit or whatever, that's always going to mess your image up a little bit. Then also, if I have any private conversations with the wife, if she nags me or something, then of course, you know, I don't want to have to blot anything out. So this way, for the whole journey, we can communicate more with each other, let's say. But anyway, the camera is facing forward, so we didn't get to see much of the Ring Mall. But if you want to have a closer look at it, on my channel, if you scroll down the videos a little bit, I do have a vlog which I made there, so do feel welcome to go and watch it if you're interested. And of course, if you're willing, you're welcome to become a subscriber as well. So this journey we are taking, like I said, is from the Ring Mall up in the former Yubei district. So recently there was a Jianbei and a Yubei district, kind of north of the Jialing River, but towards the end of last year they were merged into one, and what was called Jianbei and Yubei districts then became the Lianjiang New area. But that's a kind of a complicated topic, so we can talk about that another time. Okay, so this is Dapo Tunnel. Again, still close to where I live, and this cuts through Jiamu Mountain. So Jiamu Mountain I have also filmed before, and it's a beautiful forest park with lots of nice trails right close to where we live. And depending on how much time you have available, you can do like a mini trail that maybe takes half an hour. The one I generally go for is about 1 hour, but also the mountain is kind of very long and narrow, so if you want to walk that bit further, there are some trails that can take like 2.5 hours to 3.5 hours, depending on how fast you walk. Now, the day this is being filmed on is February the 16th, 2026. So this is New Year's Eve according to the Chinese lunar calendar. And for the most part, the roads are very quiet. And I can assure you it's not normally like this, especially during term time and at rush hour. And this place is not this point here is not one of my favourites, to be honest. This is the Gumufeng flyover. So we've just had a lot of lanes, but a lot of people need to cross over this at rush hour. And it's like a classic bottleneck. It's like a classic bottleneck we get in this part of the city. So we have, 3-4 lanes of traffic just squeezing into 1 or 2 here. And at rush hour, it just becomes pure mayhem. So I kind of wish it was like this on most days. I mean, this is just a breeze, and normally I can't get through this quickly. Then coming up here, we have another feature which you see a lot in Chongqing. It might be that in many cities, even in other countries, we have a fork in the road, but here this is more like a trident in the road, so you've got 3 different directions. So this is not uncommon in Chongqing, so unless you know your way around, it is easy to take a wrong direction here. I mean, I know this place, again, like the back of my hand, so it's no problem for me. But when I'm driving around, I know I see this situation very often where we have a new driver who's not familiar with this area, and it happens often that your satellite navigation, like on Baidu Maps, just can't update fast enough, because you go through one exit and then within 100 meters you might have another fork in the road, or even 3 different directions you could go in, and sometimes it just doesn't update. And I will sometimes see cars ahead, they just don't know where to go, so they come to a complete standstill in the middle of the road, and they're just kind of thinking to themselves, they're trying to look at the map and work out, which way they should go. And there's a famous saying in Chongqing that if you take a wrong exit, that you can end up doing a day tour of the city. Now that might be a slight exaggeration, and it's not true in all cases, but it has happened to me before in parts of the city I'm not so familiar with. You've taken a wrong turn and it can take you a long time to get back to that original point, or take a detour to your ultimate destination. So this road we're on at the moment is the Ring Road motorway, and it basically does a circle around the main parts of the city. But the city has expanded quite a lot in recent years, so there are some districts that have developed quite far beyond it, but nevertheless this is still a really important artery in Chongqing. Fortunately now there are 5 lanes in total. In the past, about not that long ago, I can't say exactly how many years, maybe 5 years ago, there were only 3 lanes going in each direction. And really the past 10-15 years, the number of private vehicles in Chongqing has really exploded. There's so many people own their own cars now that the road just couldn't handle that volume of traffic. So the city made a decision. They decided to expand the Ring Road motorway, going in both directions, to 5 lanes. And that was a huge undertaking. And it wasn't all done at one time as well. They kind of did it in sections. Some of them were easier to complete. Sometimes it was just a question of clearing a bit of land and then laying some new road, some new road lanes. But there were other parts that were more complicated, like they had to move pillars of bridges. Maybe they had to excavate some hills, demolish some houses, even build bridges, mini bridges in places as well, so that you could widen the road here. But more or less this construction project is finished, and now there are 5 lanes. In general, even at busy times, you can get past in a reasonable time now. Although at the busiest of times, it can get a bit slow. If you look at that car we've just overtaken on the right, you can see it has a fluorescent green license plate, and you will see some others that have blue ones, like my car does. So basically the blue plates, like that one there, is just a traditional internal combustion engine car running on petrol, gas if you like to call it that, or diesel. But the fluorescent green ones are electric and I think hybrid cars as well. But as you can see from driving around here, the number of electric cars on the roads now in Chongqing is quite impressive. Sometimes when you come up to the lights, it feels like there are more electric cars around than there are petrol and diesel ones. And the infrastructure within the city isn't too bad. There are quite a lot of charging stations around. But for me personally, and you might have got that impression, if you watch some of my Rotten Tail videos, that I'm not the greatest fan of EVs. I mean, I have driven them before, and there are some software developers who make these smart systems for EVs that ask me to test drive them and all that. So I'm happy to do that. But when it comes to buying one, and especially going on long road trips to other provinces, I mean, I think my preference is still the traditional ICE engine. Okay, so we've left Yubei District, former Yubei District, we've gone through Jiangbei, and now we're about to cross the Jialing River on this bridge here. And they had to build in extra pillars to widen this bridge too. Now this lane is quite special. I mean, this came up quite fast. So this is one of those, fast pass lanes. My terminology might not be the best. But on the right, there is a motorway exit coming up. And in the past, I suppose a lot of motorists had a bad habit where they wanted to take the exit, but they also wanted to get there quickly. So as they approach it, they would still be in this lane, like the leftmost lane. And then, let's say, when you're 100 meters from the exit, suddenly they'll start shifting across 4 lanes of traffic, even if it's moving quite fast like this, and go and take that exit. And at busy times, that would just, trap everybody behind. I'll come back to that point in a moment. A few seconds ago, we just passed an ornament. We've actually got some more coming up here. If you look at both sides of the road, we've got these red cliffs. So this is Sharpingba District, and not far from this location there's a scenic area, a historical scenic area called Redcliffe Village. And I suppose during the Civil War period, we're talking maybe 1930s, 40s, there was a place called Redcliffe Village, and it was like a big base for the 8th Route Army, PLA, CCP and all that. So when you're in Chongqing, you often hear them eulogize, this thing's called the Redcliffe spirit. Okay, so basically it's that kind of revolutionary spirit. And we've got some more of this red wall on both sides here. So that's kind of like a local characteristic that they've brought to the decor of this motorway, ring road motorway in Chongqing. Okay, so I was just talking about that fast lane. So really that was kind of like a solution to that problem, because we had a lot of people travelling in the leftmost lane, but then moving at the last moment all the way across 4 or 5 lanes of traffic to take the exit, and that was just backing everybody up. So for those people who wanted to just cut straight through, they made that solid line without the brakes, not like these dotted lines. And when you get into them, you're not allowed to cross that line into the other lanes of traffic, and vice versa. Otherwise you'll get snapped by those CCTV cameras, and you'll probably get docked some points and also have to pay a traffic violation fine. So for the most part, I think it's a good idea, but it does have its ups and downs. So of course, the advantage is, I think at busy times it does help the traffic move a little bit. You can pass those intersections more quickly because you have fewer people blocking them. But the problem with the design, I think, is that you don't get a lot of warning. So if you go back and watch it again, the warning sign that you're coming up to this fast lane is maybe only 1 or 2, maybe 300 meters beforehand. And if you're distracted for whatever reason, and and you're not really familiar with that area, it can turn a bit into a trap. So it might be that you wanted to take that next exit, but then you get trapped in that fast lane, and you either have to keep going and take the next exit, or you just run the risk of being snapped by the CCTV cameras and getting a fine and points deduction. So I'm quite familiar with where they are in my district, the former Yubei district, but you can find them in other parts of the city, and if you're not familiar, it is easy to be trapped by them, so you always have to be on your toes driving in Chongqing. I've just passed another one of those Red Cliff spirit ornaments by the side of the road, but I don't think there are going to be any more after this because we're probably getting quite close to Jiulongpo district now. Got a bit more actually. Some more Red Cliff spirits. On the road signs, we can also see Chongqing West railway station is not far from here. But again, because of the direction the camera is faced in, and also there's going to be things in the way, we're not going to be able to see it this time. So we're coming up to our exit. So this is the western intersection. We can go one of two directions. If we go left, we go into the city. But we're heading westwards, southwest, towards Yongchuan. So we're going to continue on the motorway. We're going to cut through that mountain range and then go on for a couple of tens of kilometers. So there are lots of things we can talk about while we're driving on the motorway. One of the things I want to talk about is the standard of driving in Chongqing. So let's start with that. Well, I think, driving standards in Chongqing, I mean, this might be a controversial topic, and not everybody will agree with me, but I got my first driving license from the UK in 1997. So I started driving when I was a teenager. Then I got my license in China in 2008. So I've been driving quite a long time. So it's been nearly 30 years since I got my first driving license, and I've driven in Chongqing for how long now? For 10, maybe 15, 16 years or so. I've never been in a car accident, so even if you don't agree with me, I am definitely a qualified judge to state my opinion on this one. Yeah, this is one of the tunnels we're going through, and you'll find these tunnels really impressive. Maybe in a future video I'll show you the kilometre after kilometre of tunnel and bridges we have when we cut from the old Yubei district all the way down to Nan'an. I'll try to make that one for you one day. But yeah, it's insane how long these tunnels are and how many they've built all over the city. So it's really engineering marvels like this that has made the expansion of the Chongqing urban area possible, because only a few years ago, before these tunnels opened, in huge swathes of the land were really quite inaccessible and would take ages, like half a day to reach. Okay, so back to the topic I had begun, driving standards. So I first came to Chongqing in 2003, and without pulling punches, Chongqing was really the Wild West of China in those years. It was still unknown internationally. Still a bit of a mess, construction everywhere, very kind of dirty, dusty construction sites everywhere, dirty old rickety buses and vans and all that spewing out, black smoke everywhere, factories, power stations in the urban area, just, so polluted, you could hardly breathe in those days. Okay, we're out of that tunnel. So the roads were no different at that time, and even roads like this that I don't think even existed, or had only just opened in those years. But I think car ownership wasn't so ubiquitous in those days. But really, I think the enforcement of traffic regulations were very, very lax. So you would see quite a lot of accidents. And I remember that the first major accident I ever saw was maybe about a month after my arrival in Chongqing in 2003. So I remember a mentor at my old school, because I worked in ESL in those initial years before I changed paths and went into media. But I had a mentor whose family took me to Chengdu and Jiuzhaigou, which is like a beautiful... No, Hailuogou, not Jiuzhaigou. Hailuogou, up in the western Sichuanese mountains. Yeah, and that was pretty crazy. I mean, a lot of the roads were undeveloped, and I remember as we climbed up into the mountains on this rickety old bus. I mean, it was basically dirt, gravel tracks on the side of these mountains, and there'd be hundreds of feet vertical down to the bottom. So it was pretty dangerous. And then I remember in Moshi, a little city outside the scenic area, there was a bus going back to the main city, but I think it was during the China National Day holiday at that time, and it was just a complete free-for-all. I mean, we were going onto the public transport bus, and just people just didn't want to queue. I mean, we kind of queued up properly to go in through the door. But whenever a bus pulled up, there was also loads of people who would just climb up the tyres up the side of the bus, open the windows up and climb in through the windows and get the seats that way. And there was this one bus ahead of us. It was just overloaded. It wasn't particularly well maintained either, I guess. And it caught fire, and before you knew it, the whole bus was just incinerated down to a black frame. But we were okay, fortunately. And then on another coach from Chengdu to Chongqing, the first time I went along that motorway, we passed, we got stuck in a long queue of traffic, and we passed a really nasty accident. Private cars overturned, glass, shattered all over the road, and also bodies and blood, splattered everywhere. So back in those early days, sights like that weren't uncommon in Chongqing. Yeah, and driving around, just the manners were terrible. Just really noisy people, papping their horns all hours of the day and night. Yeah, and just, crashes, everywhere. But today, as you can see from the video, I think things have changed quite a lot. So I think throughout this journey, you'll see that everything looks very civilized now. There's no real dangerous driving or anything. And also because it's New Year's Eve, most people who are travelling, going home for the Chinese New Year, have already reached their destination. So normally, the New Year travel rush is in the 2 weeks leading up to the Chinese New Year. But by the time you reach New Year's Eve, most people have already reached where they want to go. So if you choose that day or the first day of the new year to go travelling, you'll probably find the roads are pretty quiet. And on day one of the new year, if you want to take a flight somewhere, if you go onto one of the travel apps, you'll find some insane discounts. And I'm sure you'll find a lot of those channels like China Observer or something. They'll show, I guess, well, they have in the past, they've shown videos from the Chinese New Year of empty trains and planes and all that, and they say, oh look, nobody, everyone's too poor, they can't travel anywhere. These airlines, high-speed rail network are making terrible losses and all that, but that's fairly normal for a day like this and the first few days of the Chinese New Year. Okay, so we've just gone through the toll booth. So this is something I will talk about next, but let us continue on with the main topic that we've just been discussing. Yeah, so since most people have reached where they want to go and the roads aren't that busy, everyone looks pretty chilled out. But for the most part, I find in Chongqing nowadays, people's driving skills are pretty good. But they do have one fatal flaw when it comes to driving. And I would say, and I've said this before in interviews I've done on other platforms, like Mandarin Corner, you can find me on there. Just look for Englishman gets his green card. Oh, I haven't seen Eileen for years now. But anyway, the main issue I have with drivers in Chongqing are, one, just like common courtesy. So the main thing is they really don't like giving way. So up ahead, if somebody wants to move into my lane, as long as it's safe, I will normally leave enough space for them to manoeuvre and they'll go in. But if I'm in a similar situation, maybe 8-9 times out of 10, they see you indicate and it's kind of like, oh shit, he wants to get into my lane, right? And it's just like, it's like a race, like a competition for people, they just can't. Maybe at a subconscious level, they really hate to see people kind of get ahead of you, and maybe this is kind of instilled in locals here through the education system, just because it's so cutthroat. You have to outscore everybody else to get your commendation certificates, get into good universities and jobs and things like that. So I think that mentality also extends to the road system. So 8 or 9 times out of 10, if I need to maneuver into a lane and I indicate, they will slam on the accelerator and they'll physically try to block me from moving into that lane, which gets really, really annoying. And there are loads of other bad habits as well, which I don't think they do intentionally. I mean, I would say because people in Chongqing are awesome. I mean, they're really great people, so friendly and welcoming. Yeah, but I mean, I suppose when it comes down to public common courtesy, there's still a little way to go. But it's not that they want to make life difficult for you or anger you in any way. I mean, it's just they do a lot of these things at a very subconscious level. But when it comes to bad driving habits, I mean, I could make a video about that in itself, and I will do at some point in the future, especially if you enjoy this video. So don't forget to like and leave your comments down below. Yeah, so with the driving standards, when did things start to get better? Well, I mean, if I go back a few steps, I can give you a personal story. And I can tell you this video is not going to get posted on Chinese social media like Bilibili and Douyin and all that, or WeChat videos. This is only going up on YouTube, so I can speak about these things a little bit more freely, I think. So I can share a personal story with you, and this is about my late father-in-law. Okay, so he passed away in 2015. And he retired from his job probably just before I met him. Through my wife, of course, back in 2004. But because for his job, throughout his career, he had to attend a lot of banquets. And back in the day, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, they were always, quite drunken affairs, pretty wild. And it always involved, downing, binging on lots of rice wine. I mean, again, that's a topic we could discuss in a whole other video. I mean, I always hated rice wine, but I don't know, maybe it's like an acquired taste, like whiskey or something. So I hated it for a couple of years, but then over time, as I tried some different brands and all that, there were like a few that I was able to tolerate after a while, and as long as I didn't have to drink them in really huge quantities. But anyway, being a Chinese man, my late father-in-law, he was binging on that stuff all of the time. And then also with food safety as well back in those days. I mean, there were tons of additives and all that, and all kind of chemicals, in the meat, and I don't know, pesticides and things like that. So I think over the decades, these things really took their toll on his health. And I'm not going off topic, stick with me, I'm not rambling, because this will link back to the question of driving. But anyway, when he retired finally, he wasn't in a great state of health. He was suffering from a couple of things. He had diabetes, so like every day he was using that diabetic pen, injecting himself with insulin. He wasn't all that fit basically. He kind of, I never saw him run or anything, not as far as I recall. And also he had a, what do you call it, a cerebral infarction or something. So when you have, stiffened or narrowed arteries and brain capillaries and all that. Yeah, so really, his final years he wasn't in the best physical state, to be honest. And most of the time, after he retired, his entire life kind of went around in this circle. He'd like wake up in the morning, he'd have some breakfast, he'd watch some TV, maybe play, he really enjoyed playing the erhu, like the, kind of like a Chinese violin or something. Then he'd have his lunch, he'd have an afternoon nap. Then he would get up, he would go out, he would walk to the local mahjong parlour. So he had some buddies down there, he would maybe play mahjong for 2 or 3 hours. Then he'd come back, he'd have his dinner, he'd watch TV for a couple of hours, and maybe come 10, 11 p.m, maybe my mother-in-law would help give him a bath or something. Then he'd go to sleep, and basically for his final couple of years, his entire life just kind of went around in that circle. And that's not uncommon either. I do know some other British guys who are married to Chinese ladies, and maybe their father-in-laws are sometimes in similar physical states as well. Yeah, and they just kind of go through life, day after day in this kind of daze, not really doing anything or speaking with anybody. But anyway, I'm going to tie this back with the question of driving. But anyway, despite all of this, he had like one dying wish, let's say, and that was to get a driving license and own his own car and drive it on the public road, even though he was in no physical state for it. So back in those days, I mean, I can't give you a specific year, but like in the first decade of this century at least, I think the examination system for getting your driving license was pretty corrupt. And when I say that, I mean you could get in the car with your examiner, and no matter how well or badly you drove, as long as you kind of gave him an envelope with some cash stuffed inside of it, you could pass the test. And I do know this personally in some cases, including the man I've just been talking about. He tried it. And a lot of these people, they got their driving license, and they became what became known in Chongqing as 马路杀手, basically road killers. Just people who had their license and were let loose on the public roads despite having terrible driving skills. And I'm sure over the years now they caused a lot of accidents. and worse as well, probably lots of deaths and injuries and all that. But I would say things took a big turn. I would say from around the end of the first decade up until about 2011 and 2012, because there were some new leaders who took over the city, took control of the city. Again, this isn't going up on Chinese social media, so I will name them for you. And, this is kind of an expensive topic, so I won't go into this too deeply. But anyway, around that time, 2009-ish, there was a new leader and police chief who came to Chongqing. And the leader was called Bo Xilai. And for a while, he was going to be like a big political rival to the current president. But he ended up getting deposed because there was a English businessman who got murdered in the city around that time, maybe around 2011, called Neil Haywood. And whatever happened, I mean, it's all a big mystery. I mean, we can only go on what we're officially told. But anyway, that death was basically pinned on either him or his wife. And he was removed from his position, deposed as a political rival, and basically been disappeared ever since. We haven't really heard that much from him again. But anyway, he took over around that time. And then his police chief, who was called Wang Lijun, he also moved here from the same province. They came from Liaoning province, kind of up in the northeast. And I think they were given the objective of cleaning up the city. So I think, before they came, Chongqing was definitely the Wild West of Chongqing. Basically, anything went in those days. I mean, we've just been talking about the roads. But also, there was a big, criminal underground network. And I know a lot of the new YouTubers who visit the city, the ones who've had millions of views, I mean, they always go on like how safe China is. You can walk around, the city in the dead of night, Chongqing, anywhere you like, and you'll be absolutely fine and nothing will get stolen. Well, I think that is true now, for the most part. I mean, I think common sense principles still apply. But for the most part, yeah, it is a pretty safe country to live in nowadays. But again, back before those two individuals took over, I mean, there was a big criminal underground, and it went from top to bottom, basically from political classes to police chiefs, right down to the common crook on the streets. And you can learn more about this if you search for the Chongqing trials. So they came along, and very quickly, things started to change. Basically, I remember in those days, on every street corner, you'd have one of these police stalls set up with these big umbrellas. The car with the police car with the flashing lights on. And basically, loads of people who are passing by, whether motorists, motorcyclists. Yeah, there were no e-bike riders in those days. Pedestrians, anybody who looked remotely shifty. They were they were calling them over, pulling them over, getting them out, and they were checking documents and things like that, asking what they're doing, what they're up to and all that. Yeah, so the city was run quite strictly during those years. And, I think thousands of people, I think, real criminals and, corrupt officials and police officers and all that, were rounded up. A lot of them were jailed, some of them returned to their home provinces, and in some of the more serious cases, even a few were executed as well. But after that, and after he became a major political rival, and the death of Neil Haywood, they were deposed, and new people took over. But it was really during those 2 or 3 years that, everything changed in the city. It went from just being like the Wild West to really being a clean, modern, well-organised city. So, whatever you say about them, they definitely left their positive mark on the city. I mean, not everything was, a bed of roses. I mean, I suppose, you could talk about the tactics being quite harsh. But then again, if you're dealing with, hardened, criminals, from police chiefs down to, the street corner, then, they're not going to go away if you say please. So overall, I think, they did make a really big contribution to the development of this city. And if the criminal underground hadn't been eradicated, then really, I don't see, Chongqing. I don't see how Chongqing could have developed into the major, modern, internet sensation city it is today. Yeah, so basically in those days, my father-in-law, I think he tried, to bribe his driving examiner. And I don't know if you'll believe me if I tell you, but I'll tell you anyway, and whether you believe it or not is up to you. But my mother-in-law, I mean, she was terrified. She was terrified at the prospect of him driving on the roads, and he was in no physical condition whatsoever. If you had to rate his physical, suitability for driving out of 10, I would have to give him a 0. If he really got behind the wheel and started driving, he would have been a big hazard to himself and other people. So anyway, he kind of, what's the term for it? Oh, what's that term like? When you strike before the enemy does, or somebody else does. Preemptive, that's right, it's a preemptive strike. Yeah, she found out, she contacted the driving school, and my mother-in-law, she bribed the examiner to refuse my father-in-law's bribe to pass the exam and fail him, if you get what I mean. And I'm telling you the truth, she actually did that. And even though it maybe, in a way, it broke his heart to fail the exam every time, because he did try a couple of times, and he failed on each occasion, and eventually he just kind of begrudgingly accepted it and never tried driving again, and had to content himself with being a passenger, maybe when I was driving, or my wife's brother-in-law, or in a taxi or something. Yeah, so around that time, 2008, 2009, just all of the corrupt practices were kind of eradicated for the most part, at least in public life. And I think after that, I haven't really heard of this thing really happening again. So after that, I think the driving schools, the examiners were more strictly regulated. So now, you really have to be up to scratch before you can pass your test and finally get your driving license. So I think now that was the case. Driving standards in general improved a lot. And also, even though a lot of people bribed, the examiner, or maybe passed in other ways. I mean, what am I suggesting here? For example, if you're like a young pretty lady or something, maybe you could sweet talk the examiner in a couple of ways to pass the test. But even that now was maybe 15, 16 years ago. So even the road killers who got their driving license in inappropriate ways back in the day, I mean, they've now got 15, 16 years of driving experience under their belts. So I imagine after this amount of time, they're not really road killers anymore. I mean, they should be experienced drivers. Yeah, so now the only issue I have with driving in Chongqing is not the driving standards. I mean, every now and then you do get the odd dippy driver, the newbie you got to be careful of. About 7 or 8 years ago, there was other phenomenon with the panda vehicles, like the leased EVs that you could, scan and get behind the wheel of and drive around. These were like kind of electric, Mini Cooper style vehicles, and they were a big menace on the road a couple of years ago. But I'll try to track one of those old vehicles down. They're not on the road anymore. I mean, those went out of business quite a long time ago. But I'll try to track one of them down and maybe go and make a vlog or another video about it sometime. Yeah, so now most drivers, to me feel pretty safe, and I'm sure you can see that from this video we're making at the moment. So the only problem I have now are the bad habits, like the rude driving and all that. So we're already quite a long way into our drive. It's amazing how quickly time flies when you're doing one of these commentary videos. But there is another topic I can talk about with you for a while, and that is the ETC toll booths. So we passed one of those about 20 minutes ago, and yeah, they're kind of an interesting story in themselves. Now, the ETC, as you might be able to guess, stands for electronic toll collection. And basically how it works is, if you want it, you can either go to a bank, because if you have a credit card with one of the banks in China, it might be, the China Construction Bank. We've had that in the past. And I suppose as one of those perks, if you want to call it that, they can act as an agent and install the ETC in your car on behalf of the road toll company. And if you bind it to a credit card, then they will also offer you a discount. It's not going to be something huge. It might be like a 5% discount or something, just depending on the bank and particular credit card you have. So you basically sign a small agreement with them. You drive to the bank, and then one of the agents, he'll kind of stick. In the past, there's one of these like readers you kind of stick inside your windscreen, like behind your rear view mirror, and it would have like one of those miniature solar panels on it. So like if you parked outside, driving around in the daytime, it will charge up the batteries, and then you would have like a little card you can slot in it. And as long as the green light comes in and you get that little beep, then you're ready to go. And basically what it allows you to do is, when you get to the toll booth, you can take one of the dedicated ETC lanes. You have to slow down a bit, normally 20 kilometers an hour. The camera captures your license plate, and then also they have like a detector that can detect the reader in your vehicle as well. Then it beeps, and then the barrier goes up automatically. And at times that could be really useful, because for some reason there's still quite a lot of people who don't install it. They just go through the manual booth, or the automatic one as well. So the automatic one, you come to the foot of the line before the barrier, you push a button, and then it gives you one of these ETC cards which you keep in your vehicle. And then when you leave the motorway network, you can push it into the machine there. Your toll comes up on the screen, and then basically you can flash like a QR code for a digital payment. The scanner is very powerful. You can almost hold it inside your vehicle. You don't have to hold it out, really close out of the window. So it detects the QR code, the payment goes through, and the barrier opens up. Also, you can go through a manual booth as well, a staffed booth. So that way, I think it's still possible to pay with cash if you really want to. And also, if you want a receipt as well, because a lot of people, if they're going out for business, work or whatever, they can take a receipt and claim the tolls as an expense. Yeah, you can get it on the spot that way. But even if you use the ETC and you want to get a receipt to claim expenses, there are a couple of little apps, handy apps you can get. The one I like to use is called Piaogen, basically like a ticket stub, an app called Ticket Stub. And you put in your license plate, maybe some personal details, and you can basically find all of the motorway journeys you've done, and then you can select which ones you want receipts for. Then you push the confirm button and it sends you the e-receipts by email. Yeah, and then you can transfer that to people. You can print it out and claim it as an expense. Yeah, so sometimes when the roads are really busy, you can queue for ages, for the automatic tolls or the staffed booths. But if you have an ETC, as long as everything is working okay, yeah, you can just breeze through. So it can potentially save you a lot of time. But it doesn't always go to plan though, because sometimes the e-readers do have their issues. So in the past, and this is in my experience, whenever you get them through an agent, especially the banks, they normally give you like a dud card reader, maybe one that's been used before, might be second, third hand, not in the best condition. So they install it and maybe it works for a while, but then after a couple of weeks or months, you go through one of these ET booths and the booth fails to recognise the reader. And then you're kind of in a spot of trouble because the barrier doesn't open. And then before you know it, you've got other vehicles with ETC installed or queuing up behind you. But whatever happens there, they're not going to open the barrier for you. They always insist you back out. So if you're unlucky, you might have like a queue of, 5, 6, 7, 8 vehicles behind you, and everybody has to back out to give you enough space. And then you have to drive across a few lanes of traffic and go through one of the manual booths. So that can be pretty dangerous, because when you come to those booths, a lot of people drive quite fast. So in my, after years of experience, if there's a car in front of me, I normally try to go through an ETC lane that is completely clear. But if there is somebody ahead of you, then you want to kind of slow down and leave a bit of distance behind them. And that way, if for whatever reason the barrier doesn't open, they will have enough room to back out. Yeah, so most of the time it's like a problem with the reader, and it's normally because the bank or the agent has given you like a second or third hand card reader that's in a bad state. But I tend to find if you go to the ETC company itself, and normally in the big cities like Chongqing, Chengdu or whatever, you can find a couple of them kind of at the major motorway exits, in and out of the city or on the ring road. And if you go there, normally they will give you a brand new one. And whenever I've had one from the ETC stations, I've had no problem with them whatsoever. Having said that, I did have an issue about half a year ago. So I went through the booth a couple of times and it failed to open. And I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe it's just the card, maybe I didn't, slot it in properly. But then after it happened, 2 or 3 times in a row, I thought, maybe it's a different issue. So I went back to the ETC station, and they said that the old-fashioned, ETC card readers, where you slot in the card, has been abolished. So they said you don't need this one anymore. They issued me this new one, which you don't need to slot a card into. They fixed it onto the windscreen, inside windscreen for me, and tested that it works, and ever since then it's been absolutely fine. And it works for the entire motorway network nationwide as well. Yeah, so overall, like, the ETC is really good. But yeah, the only issue is a lot of people drive around with the poor quality ETC readers. So it is a fairly common occurrence for me to see people backing out of the ETC lanes. And it might also be that maybe some people at busy times, maybe they get a bit impatient waiting for the stuffed booths. So maybe they try their luck with the ETC lanes, but they still don't open. And also, I can tell you something interesting about the motorway network during major holidays, like the Chinese New Year. And that is the entire motorway network nationwide is toll-free. And I think this year, the toll-free period is like 8 or 9 days. It's really long. So on this journey we're taking today, from Chongqing to Songji Ancient Town, it would normally, I don't know, maybe be about 60 or 70 yuan. So £6-7 sterling, maybe 10, I don't know, $8, $9, $10. But today, and for the rest of the Chinese New Year, the road network is completely free, so I didn't get charged anything for using the motorway on this trip. And you know, a lot of people use that to their full advantage as well. So in past years, you know, like last year during the Chinese New Year, I drove to Yunnan province and back, and that was a round trip of about maybe 1,1300 miles or something. Yeah, I went from Chongqing to Leshan near Chengdu, down Xichang, Panzhihua, Lijiang, Dali, Yunnan, Kunming, Chujing, Yanjin, you know, the narrowest city in the world, then through Yibin and back to Chongqing. Yeah, and I didn't pay a single penny for road tolls on the motorway network, you know, that holiday. And then in past years, I've also driven down to Hainan, including the ferry as well, and yeah, probably saved like the best part of 1,000 yuan on road tolls. Yeah, so that's always a good opportunity. And during the Chinese New Year, as we can see on this trip today, the roads are really quiet. But on other holidays, especially China National Day, from let's say the 1st of October through to the 5th, and then May Day, the May Day holiday, the first 5 days of May. The motorway networks are also free, but it's like traffic hell for the most part, because those are kind of more like travel holidays, whereas the Chinese New Year is more about family reunion. It's not so much about, you know, travelling, going on holiday and all that. So really, if I had to choose a favourite time for going on a road trip, I mean, probably the first couple of days of the Chinese New Year are complete heaven for me. So every now and then, you know, you can see they have a lot of these structures put over the road, like this one coming up here, and they're full of CCTV cameras. Yeah, so you'll notice as well that you don't really see many police cars on the road, and for the most part you don't see a lot of patrols around. And I think one of the reasons is, you know, everything is kind of done with smart technology, so most of the network is under surveillance, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing. Yeah, so one of them, you know, one of the the aims of having all of these cameras is, of course, surveillance. If something goes wrong, you commit a traffic violation or something, you're likely to get snapped by one of these things. And that could be for like crossing one of those solid lines, like that one we've just passed. Often you'll find, those solid lines around motorway exits, and they set those up maybe a few hundred meters before. Again, to stop that situation I talked about earlier, where people go from the leftmost lane, they cross a couple of lanes of traffic at speed, and then I take the exit at the last moment, which is pretty dangerous. And there've been so many accidents, as you can see from videos on WeChat or whatever, of people doing that. Yeah, so if you try to do that, then normally you'll get snapped, and you'll have a fine and a points deduction for doing that. Also, speeding, you've got to be a little bit careful. Generally, my rule of thumb is that, I do like to travel a bit faster where it's safe and permissible. So like the driving conditions on this trip are perfect. It's dry, it's bright, not too many cars around, like the roads are pretty straight. You can see like the road surface here in China is beautiful. And that's something that's so much better than the road system in the United Kingdom, because back home in England it's like pothole hell. Yeah, but here like the roads for the most part have like beautiful smooth surfaces, no problem whatsoever. But with so many cameras around, you do have to be careful of speeding. And maybe something I'm not so keen about with speed limits in China is like the fluidity of them. So like in the United Kingdom, I think there's like a blanket speed limit. I haven't lived in the United Kingdom for a long time now, so things might have changed. But as far as I remember, it was like a blanket speed limit of 70 miles an hour. Then you have like a 10% leeway, because you do get like an error margin with the speed cameras. And I think it's like the same in China as well. So you can exceed the speed limits by about 10%, and you're not going to have any problem. Now, mostly the speed limit is about 100 kilometers an hour. So if that's the case, I would normally set my speed limiter to 110, and try to keep the speed around that. There are some sections on this journey where the speed limit is 120, in which case, I suppose you could, drive up to about 132 kilometers an hour, but I set the speed limiter to 130. So I guess maybe on this stretch of the road, I might be doing that. But then also, there are times where inexplicably the speed limit on a stretch of motorway might drop to 80 kilometers an hour. Sometimes it might make sense, maybe you're on a downhill stretch that's pretty steep and it goes on for a couple of kilometers, and then it's easier for people and trucks to lose control. Maybe their brake pads will overheat or whatever. Okay, so under those circumstances, I think it's okay. But also, there are some stretches where it's pretty inexplicable to me. There are sections where I think it could very safely be 120 kilometers an hour, but for some reason they make it 80, and it can change so quickly as well. And sometimes the speed limit on your sat nav is different to the road signs as well. So it's like some stretches of road it might be 80 kilometers, then it's 100 kilometers, then 120, then at 80 again. When you go through a tunnel, you go out, it's like 120, and then it's 80 again. So I really dislike the fluidity of these speed limits here. And in a way, for me, it's kind of a bit of a... sometimes it feels like a bit of a speed trap. And in the past, I have fallen foul of it. A couple of years ago, I don't think it's something that the traffic police really took very seriously, but in the last couple of years, yeah, even I've managed to get a couple of fines for speeding. But even so, on each of those occasions, you know, I don't think technically travelling faster than the speed limit, you know, endangered anybody whatsoever. And I think my driving record speaks for itself as well. So in a way, you know, the traffic regulations in China, I like other countries as well. I mean, it's, you know, partly about safety, but it's also, I mean, like I said, I'm not going to post this on Chinese social media, but it's also kind of like a bit of a cash printing machine, you know. So most of the fines and points deductions I have are mostly bullshit here, like you get in other countries. And then at the end of the year, maybe you go to one of the local police stations, you know, because over the and when I say police station, I mean a traffic police station, because I mean this is a bit different from other countries. I mean, I suppose in other countries like the United Kingdom, I don't know about the USA, you know, the traffic police is part of the main police force, but here in China they're kind of separate. So they have a separate organisation called the Jiaojing Dui, so the traffic police, and it's their duty specifically to manage the road system, deal with accidents and whatever, you know, public safety awareness and the like. But anyway, every year you have, you know, 12 points available on your license, and I've never actually exceeded that, because, you know, my wife has a license but she doesn't really drive that much. So let's say at the end of the year, if I have 18 points worth of deductions, me and my wife will go together, you know, we will show both of our driving license, and then maybe they will deduct 10 from mine, 8 from hers, and then after the new year, it might be the Western or the Chinese one, I'm not quite sure, or financial new year or whatever. Basically, you get your points get wiped and you have a clean slate, as long as you've settled them. So normally you'll find towards the end of the year, a lot of people go to the traffic police stations and basically pay up on their bullshit fines and all that. But whenever I've been to those, I mean, they never give you any education or anything like that. You know, they never said, oh no, you know, with this traffic violation, no, in the future, in the similar situation, you should do this or that, or, you know, what you did, you know, endangered, you know, person X, you know, because of Y, you know. No, they mean they don't give a shit really. I mean, they just want to like sit in their offices and just take the money and whatever it is you did, you know, whether it matters or not, whether you endangered any people or not. I mean, they don't care at all. But like I said, you don't find a lot of patrols on the motorways or anything like that, because it's mostly done through the surveillance system of cameras now. Yeah, so they normally surveil just to watch what's going on. If there's an accident, you know, there might be some video footage that could be used as evidence. And the other one is that they're always on the lookout for traffic violations. So I suppose the bad side is that if you commit a violation nowadays, you know, it doesn't really matter when or where it is. You know, you're gonna get snapped by these things. So that gets a little bit annoying. Anyway, we've just passed the toll booth, and now we are in Songji Town. Now my destination is Songji Ancient Town. But the ancient town is like a really small part, kind of in the middle, or maybe, you know, next to the Yangtze River. But this part of Songji we're driving through is kind of more the residential, you know, commercial edge of it. And the reason I'm coming here is that I got an invitation to attend a New Year event. So in the main square of the ancient town by the river, they're going to be holding a long table banquet. And that's like an old tradition, because I suppose in the olden days, in towns like this, you know, everybody kind of knew each other, and then a long table banquet was a way for like people to all come together, they see each other again, they share their stories of the past year, you know, their wishings and blessings for the new year. And it's a way just really to bring the community together and, you know, deepen the bonds between them. But I suppose the one they're making today is more a big cultural event. So they've got some really long tables in the main square. I think a few hundred people attended. There, you know, I met a new friend who's lived in Yongchuan a couple of years called Josh. And he was there with a pretty meow lady as well, who works in the same department or something. So I'll be releasing a video of that in the very near future, so do stay tuned for that. But anyway, I have a place reserved for me, and at least I thought I did. So anyway, it was like a local official invited me to this, because it's not really, it's kind of a public event, you know. There were, you know, some spectators outside, you know, the event itself, you know, looking on. But if you wanted to actually sit at the banquet, you needed an invitation. And because there are so many cars around, as you can see here, yeah, you could only attend the event itself with an invitation. And to get into the car park, you need, you know, one of those car park passes or something. So I sent the guy my license plate number. Then he passed that on to security, and then he also sent me like an car parking pass. So just in case I got stopped, I would be able to show them something, and they would let me through. So we're coming up to a small junction in Songji Ancient Town. I've been here quite a few times now. I think this must be my 4th visit. So if you go straight on, that leads right down directly to the riverside, to the Yangtze. But here I want to take a left turn, and I've been told to park at a place called the Qin family, or the Qin family courtyard. They have a guest house there as well, and I did ask if I could stay there overnight, but my contact, he convinced me to actually leave after the event and go and stay at a nice hotel in the centre of Yongchuan, which is much more modern. Because as nice as Songji is, I suppose when it comes to accommodation, it's still a little bit backwards here. They don't really have any star hotels or anything. They were just kind of like old, mouldy guest houses, basically. So the guy didn't want to put me up here. And from here to the main city of Yongchuan, it's about a 40-minute drive. But we're nearly at the end of the journey. Getting to the car park hasn't been actually all that bad. I mean, the road is blocked by this truck here, which is unloading for that supermarket on the right. But Songji is a real ancient town, and I think its history dates back at least to the Qing dynasty. And you know, what's good about it is that you actually have some real residents, you know, inheritors of the properties here. Because again, if you watch, you know, some of those China channels like, you know, China Observer, I mean, they talk a lot about the fake ancient towns, and that's a real phenomenon here. I mean, there are other places like, what's it called? Is it Dayong? Or is it that the what's it called? The Cao Huayuan? Yeah, that's right. The Blossom Ancient Town or something in Hunan, Changde. Yeah, I mean, they built these entire, you know, multi-billion fake ancient towns which have basically no history or cultural substance to them. And yeah, some of those have been a complete disaster and completely deserted, absolute failures. So I think, the harsh lesson is that if you want to brand, one of these ancient towns, it really has to have some authentic culture and history. But Songji is definitely one of those. So it might be quiet on an average weekend, but during these holidays, as you can see, they do get really popular. A lot of people come to see them. And you go through the old streets, and they have the nice, pretty lanterns up. You have the traditional local snacks and foods, dishes. And come the evening, when they shut up business for the night, they have those traditional doors as well, which aren't doors with handles that you can just open and close. They're kind of like, wooden planks, if you like, and you kind of have to lodge them in these grooves up and down in the door frame, and they're closed up that way. Yeah, and they close up, and then whoever lives there, as they have for many generations, they just go upstairs or maybe set out their beds, and they'll sleep there overnight and open for business again early the next morning. Yeah, so in and around Chongqing, we do have quite a lot of authentic ancient towns which do pretty well. So if you're around, Songji is definitely worth a visit, but I would just say, the geographical position makes it a bit difficult if you don't have your own private transport, and getting a taxi will probably be a bit expensive, and the drivers might not be keen on coming here as well, because it could be troublesome getting passengers going back. Okay, I'm just going to wait for this guy on the left to decide whether he's going to park up, reverse, go down this hill. So he's stopped, so now I know what he's doing. It is safe to pass. And our journey has more or less come to an end. So I think my contact from Yongchuan, he wanted me originally to park up in that main car park, but it's like too busy. And also, for my upcoming vlog for the long table banquet, I wanted to find like a big open quiet place where I could fly the drone as well. And maybe my eyesight is still quite sharp, so I spotted that gap between those two cars right next to those stone steps. So we're going to reverse into there. And then before my contact arrives, I think he's about 10 minutes behind me, I'm going to fly the drone around and get some really nice footage of the ancient town. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this little commentary with me. Do share your thoughts. Please do become a subscriber, because in 2026 it's really hard to develop your YouTube channel. If you stayed with me so far, thanks for joining me on this trip, and if you like it, do let me know, and we'll do this again in the future. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.